It finished up the evening that after about 3/4 of an hour or so they left, said cheerio, and Connie had had far too much to drink, and I'd had a bit too much to drink for myself. So I decided that I'd get her out into the open air, and we walked through the little country town, or very tiny village really, of Hamble, along the banks of the River Hamble. And it was quite a pleasant evening. But Connie and I were laughing at everything. We had so much to drink that everything we saw was funny, which was quite a good way to be, I suppose, in a way. And we had quite a good laugh. We came across the other Hamble pub, which I can't remember its name, and we went into the bar there, and we might have had another drink, except that I think by that time we realised that we'd had far too much. We just stood at the bar and laughed and laughed and laughed, and in the end we just had to leave because we were making fools of ourselves. Well, while I was there, I was saying to Connie, "Sing me a Gaelic song," which your grandmother was quite a good singer, really. She had and still has, quite a good voice, but she used to sing solo in the Gaelic choir in Paisley in Scotland, and she belonged to the Paisley choir, and she also sang solo in the church. So she really had a very good voice. In fact, at one stage, your grandmother was heard singing by a person that was connected to one of the large bands in London, and he wanted her to go down to London for a test. And of course, I was working each day at the naval establishment, and Connie, because it was wartime, had to get employment if she could get a job. And on the Hamble side, right out towards the river's mouth, was on a sort of peninsula, was the Fairey Aviation's works. So this was another aircraft factory, and Connie was able to get a job in the office there. So Connie was going to her job at Fairey Aviation Works each day, and I was going off to my naval base to work with the craft, the LCPLs. And we then got accommodation across the river in Warsash. And a little bit out, Warsash is a very tiny village, and a little bit outside, just a few hundred meters outside the town, we managed to rent a small cottage in about nearly an acre of land, with orchards, and it had all sorts of berry fruits, raspberry canes, and it was a beautiful little cottage. And the weather was quite good to us at that time. We had quite a few sunny days. Occasionally I had to go away and exercise with the craft somewhere, with some commandos or something. And Connie's mother came down, and she was able to keep Connie company. So it was great. We really enjoyed our time in Hamble. Connie, your grandmother, was given the job at Fairey Aviation's Works of warning the factory when there were air raids. And besides her office duties, she had one wall of the office was taken up by a large map of the coastal areas of Britain along that south coast near Portsmouth and Southampton and the River Hamble, and planes approaching London. So she was getting phone calls of people saying, "Oh, there are raiders approaching from such and such a direction," and she would plot the course of these planes up on this chart. And if she thought the planes were getting near to where they were, and that the Ferry Aviation Works was likely to be bombed, she had to sound the siren and get everyone down into the air raid shelters. And Connie didn't like this at all. She thought it was too big a responsibility for her. But and nevertheless, she did it. And I think the first thing that happened was that we lost our LCPs. And in place of our LCPs, we were given assault landing craft. There were 7 assault landing craft and 1 landing craft support. And the landing craft support was about the same size, had a little bit more armor plate. It had a mortar which was 3 or 4 inch, which could lob explosives and smoke shells, hopefully to lay a smoke screen for the flotilla, and we'd be able to hide behind it. And it also had some machine guns to give us some support, because none of the other craft had guns, although of course usually we were full of commandos and rangers who had plenty of firing power amongst them. We proceeded then as a flotilla from Hamble up the Solent to Southampton to our parent ship, which was the HMS Prince Leopold. We were going to be under the White Ensign, and the craft were duly raised. We had all our kit and gear with us, and the craft were raised up in the davits. And of course the Prince Leopold was an LSI, a landing ship infantry, and we made ourselves comfortable aboard. I had a cabin on the main deck, not far from the ridge. And from there we moved down to the Isle of Wight, and we exercised with commandos there. By this time, Britain had very strong coastal defences, and they were constantly manned. And what better exercise could you do than try to penetrate these defences? There were barbed wire entanglements, there were landmines, there were all sorts of fortresses. The place was simply bristling with troops. And we used to tell them where we would land, near enough. Within a few miles, we'd say we're going to come ashore on this part of the coast, and we're going to take these objectives. So you couldn't get anything much cheekier than that from the commandos. And we used to creep in at night at a beach and land the commandos, and more often than not they would get through the defences and achieve their objectives. The commanding officer of the Leopold was a Lieutenant Commander RNR, and he had a DSO and DSC and bar, I think. Had several decorations for valour. He'd been involved in Crete, in the evacuation of Crete with landing craft, and we got to know him gradually, of course, as we spent time aboard, and he was really a very fine commanding officer. All the officers who served under him really admired him, and were we all felt honoured to be on his ship. The Lieutenant RMBR, who was in charge of the landing craft, the flotilla officer, was Lieutenant Cassidy. His second in command was Tony Carter, Sub-Lieutenant Carter. And there were 2 or 3 other young officers too who worked with our flotilla. And of course the Leopold was a converted cross-channel ship. It had been one of the ships that in peacetime had plied across the English Channel from Britain to Belgium, and it had carried passengers only. It could do 20-something knots. I'm not quite sure how fast it would travel, but it was a reasonably speedy ship. Not so fast as some of the destroyers, of course. And it had good lines. It looked like a fighting ship. It had sleek, good lines, and you just like some of the destroyers or sloops looked. It had 2 funnels, and of course we had a lot of guns. We had the normal guns that a ship would have, and of course quite a lot of anti-aircraft machine guns for protection from aircraft. And we had a gunnery officer who of course looked after all the gunnery ratings, and so we used to practice firing the guns and all that sort of thing. So we felt quite a strong ship. And we went through quite a lot of operations together on the Leopold, of course. We went through the Mediterranean landings and invasions of Italy and Sicily, and finally Normandy. And we were, without boasting, an extremely competent landing ship. We were also equipped with depth charges. We could drop our own depth charges. And we had quite large smoke floats that we could drop to lay smoke screen. So we were really, it was rather nice to be aboard a whole white ensign ship and a fighting ship. So came the day that we left the Isle of Wight and proceeded down the coast of England and made our way all the way down to Cornwall to a little place called Falmouth. And we spent a couple of nights in Falmouth, and then out we went again and became part of quite a large convoy of all kinds of ships, and proceeded on our way back through the Bay of Biscay. The day before we set sail, the first lieutenant came to me and suggested that I should keep a watch on the bridge. He said, we think the officers for the landing craft should do something whilst they're at sea. And so we're doubling up on the watches on the bridge. If you like, you can go down the engine room, because you're an engineer, but we could use you on the bridge. We'll be zigzagging in convoy, and that requires quite a lot of concentration. It's very hard for one officer to do 4 hours when you're zigzagging. So I jumped at the chance to keep a watch on the bridge.